Hello, and thank you for studying Psalm 66 with me. This is the book that we're using. The overview of this psalm is that it describes the praises and awe-inspiring prayers that we will offer God upon the ingathering of the exiles. So, in other words, in the Messianic era, when there will be a time of peace and harmony and prosperity in the world, this psalm speaks of the praises and thanks that we will be offering God in that time. So in this psalm, King David tells of the wonders that God performed for the Jewish people in the past, and that these should serve as a lesson that God can deliver us at any time he wishes. So not only did he perform miracles for us in Egypt and in other cases in Persia, etc., but God is there to help us any day at any time. We should therefore not despair of his redemption. We should have faith that it's coming soon. Alternatively, David alludes to the fact that just as God performed wonders at the time of the Exodus, so will God do at the time of the future redemption. So that's when the Messiah is going to come and the third temple will be built in Jerusalem, etc. In verse 3, it says, "Because of your great strength, your enemies will deny to you their former treachery." So the enemies of God will deny ever having persecuted the Jewish people. And this literally just happened with Hamas, where one of the leaders went on record saying that the October 7th massacre was not Hamas's doing, when we know very well that it was. Many of the terrorists were captured and interviewed, and they gave up that information, that indeed it was Hamas. Furthermore, it says that God's great strength will cause his enemies to reverse their positions and make false their previous assertions. So again, just happened. So just like Pharaoh did in the time of the Exodus of Egypt, first he taunted the Jews and he said, who is your God? Like, who's going to save you? You know, he was using them for harsh slavery, etc. But then he ended up declaring at the Exodus, after the 10 plagues, God is the righteous one, and urged the Jewish people to leave Egypt. So at the end, all these evildoers will admit that they were wrong. All right, so let's see. The next verse is from verse 6. It talks about aquatic autonomy, and this comes from Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism. So before I go into reading about the parallel worlds, the revealed world versus the concealed world, I want to share a quote from a book that I read. It's called The Surfing Rabbi, and I put the quote on page 261 of my book, Fantastic Voyage, which is on Amazon and Kindle. So I want to read to you what the Surfing Rabbi says. "The ocean, according to the Kabbalah, is derived from the highest spiritual source. It represents an absolute unity with the divine. Those individuals who merited supreme spirituality were termed fish of the sea. Because of the all-pervasive quality of water enveloping created beings therein, these fish never know anything other than the secrets of the universe, residing as they do in a world of unity, as opposed to land beings who dwell in a world of separation." So with that preface and my shameless plug, let's go into what this verse tells us about Kabbalah, and you'll see the tie-in in a second. So in the concealed world, God's presence is obvious and pervasive. The spiritual beings in those worlds are cognizant of how their existence depends entirely on God, which leads them to surrender any sense of self. So it's kind of implying that the fish know that without the water, so to speak, they could not survive. Their world is therefore called the concealed world, since the existence of its beings as independent is concealed. All that is apparent is God. In the revealed world, however, God's presence is obscured. So that's our world. We see that godliness is not readily perceived. This gives us the illusion that our existence is autonomous, meaning we're self-sufficient. We could go on existing without God, as if independent from God. Our universe is therefore described as revealed, since we are not eclipsed by the reality of godliness, right? So the fish are eclipsed by the ocean, so they are, kind of swimming in the godliness, whereas we are kind of blind to godliness. The sea and dry land are metaphors for these two realities. The inhabitants of the sea are submerged in water and dependent on it. So just like, they know that they're dependent on God, otherwise they can't exist. This resembles the concealed world where the creations recognize their divine source and surrender to it. Creatures of the land, on the other hand, grow and thrive apart from the earth. Although the land is the source of their life, they remain distant to it. This resembles the revealed world where creations do not recognize their source of life and assume they are independent. The splitting of the sea, where God had turned the sea into dry land, was a monumental cosmic event that saw these two worlds unite. Creatures of dry land, until now only aware of themselves, became aware of the reality of the sea, meaning God's pervasiveness. Okay, a couple more lessons from verse 9. He has kept us alive and did not allow our feet to falter. So immersion in the spiritual world is not without its spiritual risks. Sorry, I'm not sure if I said that right. I'm going to say it again. Immersion in the material world is not without its spiritual risks. Under the pretense of seeking God in the material world, we might end up straying from God's will. Our feet may falter and become mired in materialism. So that's an explanation of this verse. Furthermore, when it says he kept us alive, he referring to God. So God infuses us with the ability to overcome our misguided wants and instead desire what God desires. This protects our feet from faltering as we engage with the material world. Verse 18, it says, even had I seen inequity in my heart, my God would not have heard or paid attention to it. So when I was in distress and cried out in prayer, I, meaning King David, thought that God would not answer me because of my many sins, or because there were iniquitous thoughts in my heart while I prayed. So when we are distracted and we are not present in our prayer. Now I realize that such thoughts were incorrect, for God in his great kindness did listen to my prayer. So one of the take-home messages and actionables is that we should pray no matter what, and even if we are distracted or we feel that we're not worthy of praying or of God even listening to us, pray anyway. From verse 12, according to one of the commentators, so first let me read the verse. So it's talking about, we went through fire and water, and you brought us out to abundance. So fire and water refer to the shades of red and white that come across the face when we're embarrassed. So even though we've done things that we're not proud of, transgressions and poor behavior, that we were still able to come close to God, and God brought us out into abundance. Like, there's still salvation for us. And lastly, verse 20, blessed is God who has not turned away my prayer or his kindness from me. So according to one of the sages, suffering that results in the abandonment of biblical study is certainly not an affliction of love. In contrast, another sage taught that the only suffering that cannot be an affliction of love is the kind that results in the abandonment of prayer. So to support this view, he cites the verse, "Blessed is God who has not turned away my prayer or his kindness from me. For had he been prevented from prayer, David's afflictions could not be considered afflictions of love." So sometimes when we are afflicted, we need to realize that everything comes from God and everything is good, and that it's for our greatest good, so that we can have a better afterlife, and it cleanses us of our sins. All right, thank you for watching. God bless you and have a great day. Bye-bye.